Hello again, and welcome to the next installment in my Granblue Versus Lancelot tutorial series. First of all, I want to apologize for taking so long to release this video. My intention was originally for this video to be a comprehensive overview of Lancelot's offense, but truth be told, after writing the script, it was literally 10,000 words, and I realized that this was too much for a single video. Additionally, with the patch incoming, it is likely that some of these things may change. So what I plan to do now is release a few smaller videos, and then if the patch changes are significant, do a follow-up that addresses what's changed. With that said, this section of the tutorial is dedicated to Lancelot's offense and what to do once you've gotten in. This first video is focused on stagger pressure and throws, which we'll then build on and develop more in the videos that follow. To start with, let's examine Lance's L normals, 5L and 2L. As I mentioned in my previous video, these two normals have plus frames. Both of them are +2 on block. 5L is 5 frames of startup, while 2L is 6 frames. 5L is also Lancelot's fastest normal. What is notable about Lancelot's 5L is that unlike nearly all other characters in the game, he does not have a far 5L. So this 5-frame normal is what you'll get anytime you press the 5L button, regardless of the distance between you and your opponent. This will allow you to counter-hit other players for trying to press their fastest normal, usually 5L, at close but non-point-blank ranges. On the other hand, 2L reaches a little bit further than 5L, and is Lancelot's only low-hitting normal besides 2U. It also links into itself for combos on hit. With these two normals, you can stagger your opponent to a great degree, set up tick throws and frame traps, and bait slower reversals. Since much of Lance's toolset is designed for in-your-face pressure, it's highly suggested that you be comfortable with these ranges and the uses for these buttons. With that said, let's take a look at some setups using these tools. The simplest mix-up is a basic strike throw, using 5L or 2L staggered into one or the other. You simply do something like 5L delay 5L or 5L throw. This can be done with 2L as well, but you probably won't want to do that right away. I'll get to why later. Now, we have to talk about some important things about throwing people in Granblue Versus. There's some throw-in vulnerability for a certain number of frames after the opponent has already returned to neutral, so you can't actually meaty them with a throw in this game. You have to wait at least 5 frames after block stun or throw techs, 6 frames after hit stun, or 9 frames after any wake up. I know that's a lot of information to take in, and honestly it is a little complex, but you have to keep that stuff in mind, and you'll eventually get used to the timings as you play the game. Lastly, a throw and a normal becoming active on the same frame will actually result in the throw winning. So if you're getting thrown when you're pressing a button, that might actually be why, so keep that in mind. In addition to this, Lancelot's throw range isn't that great. So in order to tick throw people, you either need to have dashing momentum on the preceding normal, need to tick throw after a forward advancing move, or need to micro dash before throwing. Once you've done a string like 5L throw or 5L throw, the opponent will likely be looking to avoid this mix-up again. Depending on the particular matchup, these are the most common ways to deal with this mix-up. Mash 5L, reversal with a DP or super, delayed throw tech option select, or just walk backwards. Let's look at each of these one by one. Mash 5L. 5L and 2L are +2, and your throw is 8 frames of startup. If you do a throw at the earliest time you could after a dashing normal, your throw will connect 6 frames after the opponent recovers. This effectively means that only characters with 5-frame normals can mash reliably here. But if you don't have running momentum, it does open you up to 6 or greater frame normals. Characters whose fastest normal are 6 frames or more of startup are Fairy, Medora, Vasaraga, Naramaya but only in Genji stance, and Ladiva. Although it should be noted that Ladiva can command throw you for doing this, because even with the tightest window, command throws take priority over normal throws, and the command throw hits on the same frame. If the opponent is mashing 5L to beat your tick throw setups, the obvious solution is to simply frame trap them over and over until they stop, or pick another option. The simplest way to do this is by using an L normal into another L normal. The order doesn't really matter to be effective as a frame trap, but you gain an extra frame of leniency by frame trapping with 5L. And by doing standing normals, you make throws more ambiguous. Dealing with reversals. Since mashing 5L carries the risk of being counter-hit by a number of things, the most obvious way for an opponent to cover both frame traps and throw attempts at the same time is to utilize a reversal. In terms of non-super reversals, you need to deal with fast DPs, slow DPs, parries, and otherwise armored moves. If you're using 5L to frame trap after being +2, there's a 3-frame gap before your 5L is active. This isn't enough time to press a button for the most part, so most people will turn to reversals. What this means is if somebody uses a 7-frame DP or something, you're getting hit. But because there's only 13 total frames of animation to 5L, being +2 means that if their DP is 11 frames or slower on startup, you're able to block before that becomes active. However, this does mean you need to be frame perfect. If the second 5L is even slightly delayed, the reversal may hit you if done at the earliest point possible. The characters you want to be aware of are Gran, Jita, Percival, Catalina, and Narumaya, but only in Genji stance. You need to be wary of them DPing here. The safest way to do this is to just occasionally commit to blocking after a plus normal, resuming only when you recognize that they actually didn't do anything. Or, another method, is to use turbulence to cross up their DP input or otherwise make it whiff, which is something I'll get back to later when we cover using turbulence and pressure. But just to give you a brief overview, the way this generally works is that most of the 7-frame DPs in the game actually move forward, so turbulence usually crosses up the input and gives them the wrong input, or it just avoids the DP entirely because the DP moves forward. Parries or armored moves can be reacted to with spot dodge and will usually lose to throw, so they're a much heavier risk in this situation and your opponent is less likely to use them as much. If the opponent has 100 meter, there are 2 characters you need to be wary of, Ladiva and Charlotta. Even though you are +2, these characters have supers that are fast enough to hit you before the second 5L can recover. Charlotta's only really an issue if she's at low enough health to have access to her SSBA. Ladiva on the other hand is a danger regardless and can always punish you for trying to frame trap her as long as she has 100 meter. Outside of this, you should be thoughtful of Asaraga's armor and Bubs' command grab super, but these won't necessarily hit your 5L stagger and you can simply bait most other supers like you would a slow DP. Dealing with option selects. There will definitely come a time when you come across somebody who always seems to tech your throws. What you want to pay attention to is whether it's an early tech or a late tech. And if it's an early tech, they may be guest teching, and you can blow them up for this. You can either do run-up universal overhead or run-up neutral jump. Run-up universal overhead gives you a lot more damage on counter hit than run-up neutral jump into jump H. However, run-up neutral jump is actually a lot safer because if they don't commit to a throw tech, and instead try to 2H you for neutral jumping, you can instead react to the situation much of the time with jump U to punish their 2H. So of the 2 options, neutral jump is probably the one that is safer and you should use more often. However, if you have the read and counter hit universal overhead will close out the match for you, sometimes it's worth the risk. As we can see here, it's not like neutral jump is always without risk either. Now if they always successfully tech your throws and you either see them spot dodge universal overhead, or they always seem to successfully mash out, they're most likely option selecting. And there's a couple option select options that we should talk about. The primary 2 that most people use are spot dodge into LMU or L plink LM. The former results in a spot dodge if an attack or nothing else was done. But if they were in block stun or the throw animation when they did the input, the throw break will be registered. The other option select, L plink LM, will result into 5L into auto combo, or a throw break if the input was entered after already being thrown. The problem with punishing the opponent for doing this option select is that they may actually get the early tech if the input was done fast enough, so you kind of have to feel out whether or not they're guest teching, or they're actually using this option select sometimes. If you try to go for universal overhead and you get mashed out, most likely it's because they were doing this option select. The problem with this option select is that it results in a 5L coming out when you do it. So one of the primary ways to beat this is by frame trapping or by doing like a delay stagger. If you try to neutral jump versus this option select, the opponent may react to this situation by seeing that their 5L whiffed and then deciding to DP because you're in the air. So you have to be careful about how you go about punishing this option select. The other option select can actually be punished by either doing a really deep run-in into universal overhead, or by just delaying before you throw. because this OS involves spot dodge, it needs to be delayed a little bit so that throws don't actually beat the spot dodge. Likewise, if not delayed, a universal overhead will hit the 4 frames of counter hit recovery on the spot dodge. The input needs to be timed after the startup of the throw, so that it will tech the throw, but this also makes the active frames of the universal overhead whiff. Dealing with walk back. The simplest way to avoid being thrown is to simply just not be throwable. The easiest way to do that is just to simply hold back instead of down back. If you notice your opponent stand blocking in your pressure a lot, they could be doing one of a number of things. Standing to mash 5L, holding forward to press easy input DP, trying to jump, or holding back to walk outside of throw range as soon as they leave block stun. If the mind games have gotten deep enough, they also might be just stand blocking to get you to think they're doing one of these things. But regardless, we need to talk about handling people walking backwards. Even just a couple frames of them walking back is enough to mess up the spacing and timing for your tick throw setups. If you know they're doing this, they have to commit to stand blocking, so this is a perfect opportunity to do 5L 2L instead and hit them low. If you do this, it's recommended to buffer an immediate L-Rekka afterwards, because the spacing sometimes puts you at a range where both 5L and close 5M will whiff. If you fail to consistently convert off of 2L, you can't condition your opponent to stop walking backwards as much. It's worth mentioning that you can also do 5L 2U to call out the walkback and get a much better knockdown. But it's an overtly high risk, as 2U is extremely punishable when blocked at close ranges. Now that we've gone over basic stagger and tick throw pressure, let's develop this further by using Lance's other normals. So, we know we can make ourselves plus by using 2L and 5L and can create frame trap situations off of this. If we use 5L to frame trap, there's a 3 frame gap, but 5L isn't our highest damage combo starter. If we have a good read that the opponent wants to press a button instead of using a fast DP, we want to maximize our damage from this frame trap, so the best way to do this is by using a slower normal. Close 5M is a 6 frame startup normal, and Close 5H is a 7 frame startup normal. 5H is undoubtedly our best starter in this situation, so we want to use that, but doing so creates a 5 frame gap. You might be worried that this might be too big of a gap if the opponent has a 5 frame startup 5L. Will this even work? Well, the good news is that yes, it will. Granblue Versus has a priority-based crush system, where if 2 normals would become active on the same frame, the higher priority normal wins and crushes the lower priority one. This can also happen with specials, supers, and throws. Knowing this, the 5H will beat the 5L in this situation. It's a bit strict, but you can reliably crush and counter hit 5L mash by doing 5L or 2L and then frame trapping into a close 5H. You can also do this into close 5M. This might be helpful if you're having trouble executing the 5H crush due to delay, but there's actually another reason you want to do this. Close 5M is 0 on block, and Lancelot's far 5M is at least a frame faster than the rest of the casts. And if they try to instead press far 5L, you can crush them with 2M instead, because it has the same startup as far 5M, but a smaller hurt box. Close 5M being 0 on block opens up another stagger route as well. You can only do this point blank without running momentum, or off specific microdash setups. But if you get your opponent to block a close 5M, doing it a second time will crush their 5L if they press it. This is because the distance is large enough for their 5L input to give them far 5L instead of close 5L, which is always at least 6 frames. The only exceptions to this are other Lancelot players and Narumaya, both of which have no far 5L. However, in Narumaya's case, you only need to worry about this when she's in Kagura stance, as her Genji stance 5L is 6 frames and will be crushed the same as the rest of the casts. Once you've conditioned your opponent to not mash normals after 5M, you can take advantage of this and reset into an L normal or even throw if desired. This also sets you up to be able to meaty with 5M on wake up comfortably, but we'll talk about that in a later video. Now, there's a limit to how much you can stagger without getting pushed out because the pushback in this game is very significant. Since Lance's effective range is not very big, you want to stay on top of your opponent more often than not, but resetting pressure and finding opportunities to get back in come at a risk, sometimes quite a significant one. When this happens, the 2 tools you want to use are either auto combo or Rekkas. I'll be covering those options in my next video, so be sure to tune in then. Later guys! Check out my live broadcasts at twitch.tv/Josua. I also have a Discord you can join by going to josua.net/Discord. You can also follow me on Twitter @Josua. If you've got any questions, drop them in the comments below, or drop by one of my Granblue Versus streams. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you're feeling super generous, drop me a Prime subscription over at Twitch. Thanks again!